Hello everyone, welcome to Titan Academy. In this use case, we will demonstrate a mini portal with a SmartV. Alright, so with this scenario, we will work with three forms. Our main form is the mini portal. Our second form is an update case form that we will use in modal on the table that we have there. In a second, we'll see where it's used. And we have also a registration page. So let's publish this guy. And let's see what this does, and then we'll break the forms apart. All right, so I'll put in my email address, so I'll be able to log in. Our SmartV is configured to work with a contact. You can use any object in your system. In our instance, it's a contact. You can also click here to register, and since we are using the contact object, you can create a contact directly from the registration page, and then you'll be able to log in with that contact. And this is our registration page. And if we'll break this down for a second, we can see that we have simple push, creating a contact, no gets, just simple action create, map our fields, first name, last name, and the email. And let's just view the mapped. And here it is. And this runs on a custom action. So we're running it from a custom action, which means we have to invoke it. So if we'll take a look at the submit button, it's the button type Salesforce action, and we're running the create contact, returning it to the created contact ID hidden. And on this hidden, we have a condition saying once this field is not empty, which means our contact was created, then run a simple JavaScript. And you can see we have a JS function index. You can see everything from there. So let's just open this up real quick. You can see all the JavaScript functions you get from Titan. What we're doing in this instance is the ft close modal, which will close our modal. So let's view this real quick. So I'll click here to register. Let's remove this. And I'll say new user, and we'll do new user at formtitan.com. I'll hit submit, and once this is saved, the ft close modal will close my modal, and I'll be able to log in with the new user I just created. If we will take a look at our integration logs, and with this we'll cover the registration page, and we can see our contact was created. And here it is. Wonderful. Actually, it wasn't this since I was on a different form. So this is my contact that was created, the new user. And there we have it. The registration page, I'm just going to show you this, is on the SmartV. We have a function, and on the SmartV you have a lot of options here, and you will see throughout Titan question marks. Feel free to click on any of them, and it will take you to a quick demonstration of what this function does. We can see that we have enabled registration. So we ticked allow registration, and we configured our URL to the registration URL, and it's being opened in a modal. That's great. Now let's log into our mini portal, and we'll see what we're doing there. So we'll hit login. And now, since we're configured it to have 2FA, so I got an email with my one-time password, and I'll grab this password and put it over here, and we're logged in. Okay, so we see we have our first page. I'll click Let's Start, and some gets ran in the background, and we get all the cases that belong to that logged in user, that logged in contact from that account. So whatever cases we have on the account that belongs to that contact, we're bringing it back here. And from here we have a ton of functions. Before I cover them, let's head over to the form, and we will do debug mode, and I'll show hidden fields. So we'll see how this works from within the form, and I'll hit save. And let's refresh my mini portal form. And instead of logging in every time we refresh, so we'll head to the SmartV element, and we will enable session, and we will say 20 minutes. So even if we refresh, we will still be logged in to the form. So let's refresh this guy, and I'll put in my email one more time, and I'll get the one-time password to my email, and here it is, and we'll hit continue. All right, let's start. So we see we got the account ID filled in. If I'll head over to my details, I can see I have my first name, last name, and email and mobile directly here. And this we're getting from the SmartV. We'll see in just a moment how we set this up. Okay, so let's review the table functions here. So from here we have an inline edit. We can edit directly the status of the case, and you can set up inline edit on everything that's editable on the object directly from the table functions. Another functions we have here is custom action. Once we click update, check out what happened. So you see immediately we clicked it, our case ID hidden on the bottom was populated with something, and we have a condition on this. Once this is populated, then please open this modal to the case page, case update page, case update form in our instance. So we'll say fixed and close case, and watch what happened. The refresh hidden was updated to refresh from the modal, and then we reloaded our case table. Another function we have here is add. So from here we can add a new case, and we've configured the add to allow subject entry. So we'll say hello there, and this is mandatory, and the status we will do to new. And from here we can select an equipment, since my case has a lookup to a product. So we can select this product, and we'll hit add. And again, my table refreshed since our hidden refresh was set with a new value. So here is our new case on the case table. Let's just review the case. So you can see on my case, I have a lookup equipment to be serviced. It's a lookup to a product. Okay, so these are the table functions. Let's just cover this. So if we update the contact, we will do mobile, and I'll hit save so I can update my own contact. And if I'll refresh my actions, we can see we have before then already we updated the case, we created a case, and we updated the contact just now. And if I'll head over to the logged in contact, and we can see that our mobile was updated. Okay, let's move into our mini portal. Let's start with the SmartV, and we'll see where these details are coming from. So in my details, and the account ID hidden, and the SmartV itself. So we will head to the SmartV settings, mapping, and we're working on the contact object. So if I'll click configure Salesforce integration, we're mapping a contact, so we're authenticating a contact in our instance. And again, you can do this with any object in Salesforce. We do not have any conditions. The conditions here are used for if you want to, let's say, authenticate specific contacts for your form. So you could say only if the account ID equals something, or the account family equals something. You can dynamically decide what you want, which contacts you want to authenticate. The interesting part here, and this is what we used in our scenario, is we mapped a bunch of fields. So if I'll head over to the mapping, so whenever the user logs in, immediately we can grab information from that object. In our instance, it's the contact, so we're leveraging it to map the first name, last name, email to the My Details section tab, which are over here. We're mapping it directly from the SmartV itself. Another thing we're doing, we're mapping the account ID hidden to the contact account ID. So we'll cancel this out, and maybe one of the most important things to understand with the SmartV, and similar with the lookup, is what we're deciding that the value will be. So in our instance, we decided that the SmartV value itself will be contact ID. And that enables us, for example, to call whenever we update the contact in our instance, to say that the contact ID in the update call equals SmartV. So the value that the SmartV holds in our instance is the contact ID, and you can change it. For instance, if you wanted to have a different value for the SmartV, you could say the value of this SmartV will be the account ID, and you will tick the value, and that will be the value that the SmartV will hold. So it's completely dynamic. It's up to you. Since we're using the 2FA, then we mapped an email from the contact, and we mapped SmartV from the contact. The SmartV is a very simple field. It's just a text field on the contact. So if we will view it, so it's just a custom text field with at least 5 characters. You can set it up to however you want. I think in my instance, I did 10 characters. Okay, so that's the SmartV. Let's move on to the table. Now the table is packed with features, and we have great videos in the Titan Academy about table in the basic course, and in the advanced course we have advanced table as well, and it will cover a lot more than what we're showing here. So let's take a look at the advanced. So the basic, here we set up the columns. We have the data source, which we'll review in just a second. And let's take a look at the advanced. So we can see we're allowing inline edit, and we're only allowing status. You can also allow subject. For instance, if I'll tick this, right now, if I'll head over to my cases, you can see I can only inline edit the status. But if I'll add the subject and hit apply and save and refresh this guy, and now we don't have to log in anymore since we're enable the session on the SmartV, and we can update it directly from here, and that will update the case. Okay, so let's head back and see what we're using more. So we have allow add, and the add is pretty interesting. So from here you can, in our instance, we're adding a case since the table is mapped to a case. So we can decide in the add screen, so if I'll click the add, which fields do you want the user to fill up, and you can decide if they are mandatory or not. So here we have the subject, status, and equipment to be serviced. So the subject and status are ticked as editable. If you want them to fill up more, you can just simply decide if it's mandatory or not, and you can also control the order of them. The interesting part here, that if you will notice that we're also mapping account ID and contact ID. So whenever the user adds a case, in this instance, behind the scenes, we're setting the account ID and the contact ID. What we've done here, we told Titan map values, and then we decided that the account ID is mapped to the hidden account ID. And if you remember, this hidden, we're getting it from the SmartV. Once the user logs in, we're grabbing the account ID of that contact, and we're mapping it to that hidden. So we can easily do it like so. And the contact ID, we're mapping to the SmartV that contains the value of the contact ID, since this is what we decided in the SmartV settings. A cool feature here, like we've seen that the product is a lookup, equipment to be serviced is a lookup to the product object. So you will see Titan automatically recognizes that this is a reference, and we set it up to be mandatory in our instance. We don't have to, but if I'll click on the reference, watch what Titan will tell you. So we can see that it's a reference to product 2, which is the product object. And from here, we can decide what we want to display to the users. So we're displaying the product name, the product code, and we can add easily anything from the product object that whatever fields we have on the product object. If we will click configure Salesforce condition, then we can decide, for instance, in this lookup, please, if you have active filters on your Salesforce, this will be a good idea to do it. But let's say if you want only products from a certain family, so you can say family on the product object equals or contains or anything from this operators here to whatever we have on the form. So that could be a search box from that lookup that we're running, or it could be a hidden on your form, or it could be other with a static value. This is very, very powerful, so you can filter out which products in our instance you want to return back to the user. You can also decide the sort order and meta caching. We're caching it so it will work faster. Another thing you can do from here is configure reference captions, and then you can decide how you want your captions to look like, so you can override everything in here that's shown on the lookup screen. So this is really cool. Okay, so we'll cancel this out, and just to remind you, this is what we see over here, and from the lookup we can select any of the products. Right now we're not running any filters, so we can select anything we like. Next up, let's review the allow delete. So if I'll click the delete, then I get, are you sure? And if I'll hit delete, it will delete my case in this instance. So this is enabled using the allow delete. And if I'll click to configure it, we can see we have some options here which we didn't use. So once you delete, you can return the deleted case ID to a hidden, and then if you have more logic, you can do conditioning on that hidden, saying if it's not empty, then do blah blah blah. Or you can also directly from here, once the user hit delete, you can run custom Salesforce actions. Next up is our update, and the update, as we've seen, it opens up a modal with the case update form. This guy right here. And let's see how we got this set up. So I'll scroll down, still in the table settings, and I'll hit configure. And we name the, this controls the name of the custom actions. So in our instance, it's an update. You can add as many custom actions as you like. And the only thing we've done over here is map it to the case ID hidden. And in a second, we'll see what that hidden does. We have a condition on it popping up the modal. And you can also add confirmation. Let's say if you add a custom action that deletes or does something very important, maybe behind the scenes, then you would want to make sure that your user confirms it. Then you can enable confirmation mode and play around with it as you like. Okay, so let's head to the case ID. And if I'll take a look at the conditions, I see that we set a condition on it. So the condition is very simple. If case ID hidden is not empty, then please redirect or open modal, and notice these question marks everywhere. If you click them, it will explain what this function does. So I'll hit configure to see what we've done. And what we've done here is redirect to a URL. And now, since we put it statically, you can pull it from a hidden. And we told Titan open it in a modal. And we also set a parameter. So we're passing a parameter to the modal that we're opening. In our instance, we're passing the case ID hidden that we got on the update click. So if we will review this again, and I will refresh so you can see the case ID being filled up. So once I click, for some reason I don't have the hiddens anymore, so let's enable them again. So I'll show hidden fields and I will refresh. Okay, so the case ID is empty. And once I click the update, the custom action will trigger the case ID hidden update, and then the condition will kick in and open my modal. So let's go back to that condition, and we've seen that we're passing a parameter. We're passing the case ID parameter to the FLD38 in our modal form. So let's take a look at our update case form. Very simple form. Let's see the get. Salesforce integration get. We have a get here that runs on auto trigger, and we can see it from the legend. And the condition is very, very simple, saying contact ID, case ID on the case object equals to our case ID hidden on the form. And our mappings are very simple. So we're just mapping the subject to the subject, and solution, we're mapping the description from the case object. If we will take a look at our push, this runs in a custom action, and it's an update, and we're deciding what to update, again, by a simple condition. Case ID on the case equals to my hidden case ID that we got from the parameters from the parent window. And our field mappings, again, very simple. 3 fields, we're mapping in the case reason to the solution on the form, and the subject to the subject on the form. We're also setting the status behind the scenes with a static value of closed. Since it's a custom action, let's see what runs it. So if I'll click the close case button, I can see that it's a button type of Salesforce action. If I'll click the set, I can see that we're running the case update the case, and we're returning the value of the case that was just updated to my updated case ID hidden. And what triggers the modal close is if I'll head over to the update case ID conditions, we have a condition saying if updated case ID hidden, which is the current field, is not empty, then please execute a JavaScript. And this is pretty interesting. The first line here, what we're saying is window.parent, which means my mini portal in our instance, ft set value by ID, and you can see all the JS functions of Titan over here. So if I'll do JS index, and we have all of the available JavaScript functions. So we're setting the parent FLD86. Let's see what's FLD86 on our mini portal. And you can find it real quick. I know what it is, but you can find it real quick by just searching it. So FLD 86, it's this guy. So we're setting this guy with the value of refresh. And the next line we're executing is ft close modal, which closes our modal. Okay, so that's great. So once we updated the case, we map the value of the updated case to the hidden, and then we're setting a value on the parent window and closing the screen. That's perfect. Let's see what happens once this value has been updated. So if I'll head over to the conditions, we can see that once this field is not empty, then we're running a Salesforce action. And this Salesforce action tells us to run the case get. So let's see what the case get is. And basically this is the get where the table is mapped from. I'll edit this guy, and we can see that it's used in a custom action button. And this is a great use case for this, because this get we're running at multiple times every time we want to refresh the table. So every time we add a value, every time we add a case, we run this get, and every time we update the case from the custom action, we refresh the table again. So we're running this get again. Let's see the conditions. So our conditions for this get, the account ID equals account ID hidden on my form. And the account ID hidden, if you remember, we're setting it from the SmartV itself. So whenever the contact logs in, we're pulling the account ID from the contact, and we're mapping it to that ID, to that hidden, so we can use it in our get and in our push. So we're grabbing all cases. We're limited by 30. You can limit however much you want. You can do 500. In our instance, 30 is enough. And let's take a look at the mapping. So from here, we're mapping the data to the table. So we have the case table, the case number to the case number, subject, solution, and status. Whatever we have on the, if I'll close this guy, whatever we have on the table is coming from this get. So every time I will run this get, will basically refresh my table. So what we've done over here, essentially, we set the refresh hidden from the modal because we know that our case just been updated and we want to refresh our table. So that gives us the power of pinpointing which get we want to run, when we want to run it, and execute that action. In our instance, it will happen multiple times, and I'll show you where it happens the first time as well. So you've noticed that once we land on the screen, our table is being filled up. And I'll log in again since our 20 minutes has passed. Just gonna grab the code. And the moment that you get here, you see that the table is loaded. That means that our get is running from a different place as well. And if we will take a look at the SmartV, and we'll head over to conditions, we can see we have a condition set. And this condition says, if the SmartV, our current field, is not empty, then run my get case action, custom Salesforce get. And from here, you can see the power of having a get with using custom action button, and you can run it multiple times according to your needs. So that will run every time the user has logged in or refreshed the page, that will run. So we covered the case ID, and the refresh is also covered. So every time we set the value of the refresh, we refresh the table. Let's take a look at what happens when we add. So I'll head back to the table, elements, advanced, and let's take a look at the add. And from here, we would be able, let's say, if we would map the lookup, then we would want to refresh the table as well. We would be able to set the refresh again, and we'll reload my table as well. So we can do like this, and then we can also do silent mode, and then it will refresh it automatically again from the add, and that will use, we will use that get another time. All right, one of the only things we have to cover here is the contact update. So if we will take a look at these fields, and let's say, let's discover what's happening here, and I'll say, take a look at the Salesforce, we can see that it's set in the push. We can also look at the condition and affected by, we can see it's affected by a push. So let's take a look at this push. So we have one push for this form, and this push is very simple. Just update the contact, the logged in contact. And our condition, and again, this is in a custom action button, since we don't want to submit the form, we want to let the user keep on working. So the action for the update, the condition for it is contact ID equals SmartV. And again, we remember that we set the value for the SmartV as the contact ID, and this is why we're able to make this condition. And our fields are mapped very simply, last name, first name, mobile, and email. That's very simple. And if we will take a look at the save button, it's Salesforce action, and we're running the contact update directly from here. All right, so before we wrap up, let's just review the SmartV, and let's see what else we used over here. So we've seen the enabled session, and we saw it also in action that it throws out after 20 minutes. We set a custom background color, so it will look nicer. You can also control the font family. The only thing, the other thing that we've set here is a header. We just set a header with the logo. Okay, last thing here, let's just cover some of the elements here. So the first page contains nothing, just a section with an image, and the button Let's Start is a Go Next button, since in this form we're using a page break. So the Let's Start just goes next. And on this screen we have, as we've seen, a section with two tabs. And the first tab we have our table, and the second tab we have our contact information. And this is how it's done.